You do not build a house on sand. You build it rather on rock, meaning on a solid foundation, if you want it to withstand the tests of time, like typhoons and earthquakes in the Philippines. The imagery, of course, is being used figuratively, not literally. And if you have a good literary sense, you will be able to connect it immediately with the first reading today about the collapse of the temple during the siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonian Empire. This was one of the most tragic historical events in the life of the Israelite people. Did the temple collapse because it was built? It was not built on solid foundation. And my answer to that is yes, if you can think metaphorically and not literally. And that would require a good use of your imagination. I imagine that when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon ransacked the temple in search of treasures, the first thing that he looked for inside the temple must have been the Ark of the Covenant. He must have been so excited to lay his hands on this gold-plated box with two angels guarding its top. He must have thought that the box was a treasure chest full of precious jewels. And so I imagine his disappointment when he ordered his men to open the sacred box, only to find out, ta-da, there was nothing in it except 2 tablets of stones with the 10 commandments inscribed on them. Oh my goodness, he must have been so enraged. He must have said to himself, that's it? That's what I had come to this place for? So this fabled treasure chest, which is guarded by priests perpetually, actually contains nothing but 2 pieces of worthless stones? The poor King Nebuchadnezzar must have felt cheated. He ended up demolishing, destroying the whole temple and the whole city of Jerusalem. You know, the closest parallel that I can think of for us Catholics is a story about a parish whose adoration chapel had been broken into by a burglar. The parish priest later theorized that the thief must have been motivated by the biblical passage that was written on the facade of the adoration chapel. Kasi nilagyan ng parish priest ng quotation from the Bible. And it was from the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 4. That line that says, "This treasure we possess in earthen vessel, to make it clear to us that its surpassing power comes from God and not from us." That morning, after the robbery, when the sacristan found out that the chapel had been broken into and the golden monstrance with the Blessed Sacrament was missing, he ran to the parish priest. And the parish priest rushed into the chapel and inspected the whole area, worried that the Blessed Sacrament might have been desecrated by the burglar. But you know what? He was surprised to find the consecrated host on the altar's corporal intact. And that got him into thinking that the thief was probably curious to find out what this treasure inside was that the golden monstrance supposedly contained. He even took time to unlatch the gold-framed container. And when he found out that it was nothing but a worthless piece of wafer that was not even as thick as a biscuit, he decided to just leave it on the altar. And he ran away with a monstrance. The priest smiled when he saw the Blessed Sacrament, the consecrated host. He smiled at the sacristan as he carefully wrapped the consecrated bread in the purificator. And he said to the sacristan, "No worries, the thief got only the container and left behind the treasure." Well, he did as the king Nebuchadnezzar did. Well, Nebuchadnezzar stole the ark and threw away the covenant. The thief did as Nebuchadnezzar did. He did not know that those 2 stone tablets contained the commandments that represented the covenant, the very heart and soul of the temple, which Israel herself had forgotten. I have told you many times before that I prefer to refer to the 10 Commandments as the 10 Commitments. Sa Tagalog, mas gusto kong tawaging 10 kasunduan than 10 kautusan. They're commitments. They are founded on a covenant relationship between the Israelite people and Yahweh, their God. Now they had forgotten that the love that bound them to their God and to one another was in fact the real solid rock on which their temple was founded. The prophets themselves had constantly reminded them that all the burnt offerings and all the sacrifices that they brought to the temple were meaningless if they turned their backs on their covenant. For us Christians, Christ Himself and not the law has become the very fulfillment of the commandments. No longer is the covenant represented by 2 stone tablets of the commandments, but by Jesus Christ Himself, in whom divinity and humanity have become inseparably united in one person. As St. Paul would say in his letter to the Colossians, let me quote, he says, "In Christ all things hold together." He reconciles all things in heaven and on earth, meaning God and humankind become one in the one person of Jesus Christ. He becomes the very fulfillment of the covenant between God and humankind. And we grow into His temple if we become part of His body, the church. In short, our treasure is Christ, the foundation of all that we profess in faith. Without Christ, without Him, all our cathedrals and churches and chapels are worthless. Without Him, all our institutions are like houses built on sand, built on weak foundations. Let me say this again. Some people are worried that our faith might be demolished by this pandemic. Well, is that possible? Yes. Yes, it's possible. If our churches no longer stand on the solid foundation of the love of Jesus Christ, then they really deserve to be demolished. But don't forget, as Jesus promised Peter, if his church remains founded on the solid rock, even the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it.